1 in 3 contested wills in the United States involves a claim of undue influence. After everything I went through, I understand exactly why that number is so high and why most of those claims never make it to court. My mother rewrote her will 3 times in 14 months. The first rewrite happened 6 weeks after she moved in with my brother. The second happened 4 months after that. The third happened 11 days before she died, at a point when her oncologist had documented significant cognitive decline. Each version left my brother more. The final version left him everything. I found out at the reading of the estate, in an attorney's office that smelled of new carpet and recycled air, sitting across a table from my brother, who had the specific quality of someone who has been waiting for a meeting for a long time and is relieved it is finally happening. The will was read. My name was not in it. The retention anchor. My mother had a financial advisor named Robert, careful, methodical, and deeply uncomfortable with what he had been asked to do in the final months of her life. Robert had refused a specific instruction from my brother, delivered in my mother's name, that he had considered inappropriate. He had written down what the instruction was and the date on which it was given, and the fact that he had refused it in a client note that sat in a file he did not volunteer immediately because nobody had asked him about it yet. My name is Daniel. My mother had 2 sons. I am the one who did not live in the same state. My brother Marcus had moved back home 3 years before her diagnosis, ostensibly to help, and for the first year I had been grateful for it. I have children. I have a job. I could not be there every week. Marcus could. I told myself this was fortunate. I understand now that the geography was the vulnerability, not my absence, the isolation it enabled. One by one, the people my mother had regular contact with outside the house stopped hearing from her. Her neighbor, a woman she had known for 23 years, told my attorney she had not been able to reach my mother for the last 8 months of her life. Her calls went unanswered. My mother had not moved. She had simply stopped being the person who answered. Marcus had a key. Marcus managed the medications. Marcus, it would emerge, had been present at every single meeting between my mother and her estate attorney in the final 14 months of her life. My attorney was a woman named Claire, probate litigation specialist, with the quality of someone who collects facts the way other people collect evidence and is not satisfied until she has more of both than she needs. Claire said, "Undue influence cases turn on access and isolation. We need to show he controlled who she saw and what she heard. We need to show that when she signed those documents, his version of her wishes was the only one in the room." She asked for the phone records. The midpoint arrived when the phone records came back. Every single meeting between my mother and her estate attorney, there were 7 across 14 months, had a phone record, placing Marcus's cell phone at the same location as my mother's cell phone for the duration. He had not simply driven her there and waited outside. He had been in the room. 7 meetings, 7 wills and amendments and codicils, 7 records of a woman making decisions about the end of her life, while the person who stood to benefit most sat beside her. The attorney who had drafted the documents was not a bad person. Claire told me this, and I believe her. He was a person who had accepted the explanation that my mother found it easier to have her son present, that her health made it difficult to process information alone, that Marcus was simply there to help her understand. He had never been given a reason to question whether Marcus might also be there to shape what she understood. The witness testimony flip came when Marcus testified in probate court that he had always waited outside during the meetings and had only been present in the waiting room. Claire put the phone records on the screen. The records placed his cell phone inside the building, within the same GPS radius as his mother's phone for the duration of each meeting. Not the waiting room. The building. His attorney requested a recess. The recess lasted 40 minutes. When the hearing resumed, Marcus's testimony about his presence at the meetings was revised. Robert's client note described a conversation in October in which Marcus had called Robert on my mother's behalf and requested that a specific asset, her investment account worth $214,000, be retitled into Marcus's name immediately, citing my mother's health as the reason for the urgency. Robert had refused. He had found the instruction unusual in its framing and the urgency implausible given the timeline. He had written in the client note, caller presented as the client's son acting on her behalf, but instructions not consistent with client's previously stated preferences. Declined to proceed without direct instruction from client. He had never received direct instruction from the client. The investment account had not been retitled, but the will had been changed again 3 weeks later, and the investment account had been left to Marcus in that version. Claire said, "He got through the will what he couldn't get through the financial advisor. Robert's note shows the intent. The phone records show the method. Together they show the pattern." The court set aside the final will and the 2 preceding amendments, reverting to a version dated 4 years before Marcus had moved home, a version that divided the estate equally between us. My mother's estate was distributed under that version 6 months after the hearing. I want to be honest about what justice felt like, because it did not feel like I expected. My mother is still gone. The last year of her life, the one I believed at the time was simply difficult, and that I understand now was something else entirely, is not returned to me by a court ruling. I got the money. I lost the year. Those are not equivalent trades. What I have is Robert's client note. One person who was asked to do something wrong and wrote down that he refused. That document mattered more than almost anything else in the case. If he had not kept that record, the phone records might not have been enough on their own. Think about the professionals in your parents' lives. Think about whether they would write it down.